a very important guest, the ambassador to the United States from Israel, Ron Dumer. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Mark. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. So would you tell the millions of people listening, what is the official position of the State of Israel in terms of this agreement?
Prime Minister said today a stunning, historic mistake because for so many reasons, Mark, but I'll just try to summarize it for the four main reasons. And the first is it's left Iran with a vast nuclear infrastructure. 2 years ago, people said you're going to dismantle the sanctions only when Iran will dismantle its illicit nuclear infrastructure. That didn't happen. They're dismantling the sanctions regime, and they're basically leaving that nuclear infrastructure essentially intact. And they're hoping that inspectors and intelligence will do the job. Intelligence in the past, we were wrong, you were wrong about what Iran had. We didn't know for years about secret facilities that they had. And inspectors have not done a very good job either in Iran or outside of Iran. And what we see is anytime, anywhere inspections becoming sometimes somewhere inspections. So that's the first main problem. The second problem is that these constraints that Iran is agreeing to are only temporary. The major constraints are removed in a decade, and the others are moved in about 15 years. And that means that in 10 years from now, Iran can be a greater sponsor of terror, can be more aggressive with states in the region, can be a bigger threat to Israel and America, and we're on automatic pilot to remove all these constraints on their nuclear program because there's no linkage between Iran's behavior and its nuclear program. And that's why Israel said this deal does not block Iran's path to the bomb. That's a false statement. It actually paves Iran's path to the bomb, and it paves it very quickly after a decade. And that's why the president himself said on an NPR interview about 6 weeks ago, where he said the real problem is 13 or 14 when the breakout time for Iran is about 0. That's exactly right. That's a real problem. And I know a decade may be a long time in the life of politics, but it's a blink of an eye in the life of a nation. And what we think about this deal, our Arab neighbors think about the deal, and that brings us to the third problem. Because they know that this paves Iran's path to the bomb, they're going to try to get nuclear weapons of their own. And a good faith effort to stop one very dangerous regime, Iran, from getting nuclear weapons could lead to the nuclearization of the entire Middle East. And that's a huge danger for the entire world. And the fourth problem is all of those problems would be enough, but here you have Iran being paid an enormous sum of money, about $150 billion in a few months, to fuel their war of terror that they're engaging throughout the region. They're not going to use that money, which is a tremendous amount of money in Iran. Iran's a $300 to $400 billion economy. $150 billion is like $8 trillion going to the U.S. Treasury. And I don't think Iran is going to use it to build new schools and new hospitals or to have a GI Bill for returning members of the Revolutionary Guard. That money is going to go tens of billions to Shia militia in Iraq, to Assad regime in Syria, to Hezbollah in Lebanon, to the Palestinian terror groups in Gaza, to the Houthis in Yemen, and it's going to fuel Iran's campaign of terrorism and aggression around the world. And it's a very, very sad day, Mark. 4 days ago, the president of Iran attended a rally where they were burning American and Israeli flags and shouting death to Israel and death to America. That was not 40 years ago. It wasn't 4 years ago. It was 4 days ago. And this same regime has just been given a path to have many, many nuclear weapons in the future, and today to have the funds it needs to continue its march of conquest and terror throughout the Middle East.
Ambassador Dumer is the guest, the ambassador from Israel to the United States. I mean, Israel must be absolutely stunned by this. All elements of the Israeli population, all political parties, they must be looking at this as this is an enormous and immediate threat to your country.
Well, we've known this has been coming for some time. We've been in discussions with the administration for a while, trying to persuade them not to do this deal, not to make such a historic mistake. The minister was so important and so crucial to the country that he came to make the speech in Congress that he did in March to warn about a potential deal. And now we see what's happening. We see how bad this deal is, and you're right, this is something that unites Israelis across the political spectrum. And those of your listeners who follow Israel know that there are very few things where Israelis agree on with the head of the opposition, and both of them have the same view of this deal. And what's interesting is that our Arab neighbors have the same view of this deal. And when Israelis and Arabs are on the same page, that happens about once a century. People should pay attention. And it brings up another point, Mark, that I think is very important for your listeners, and that is the difference between this deal and the deal with North Korea. A lot of people are talking about the similarities, about how all sorts of promises were made 20 years ago about North Korea. It wouldn't have a bomb. It would make the world safer. It would end the problem of proliferation. It would bring them into the community of nations, very much the same language that you see today. And people say, look what happened. But there was a moral difference between the negotiations with North Korea and the negotiations with Iran. The moral difference is those six-party talks with North Korea had the Japanese and the South Koreans at the negotiating table. They were there, and they supported the deal. So it's pretty hard to come and blame either President Clinton or President Bush for doing what your allies in the region, those who were most endangered and most vulnerable, were asking them, in some cases begging them to do. In this case, the leading powers of the world, the P5+1, are negotiating a deal with Iran that threatens the survival of Israel, that threatens the security of Arab states throughout the region. Arab states are not there. And you know, as somebody once said famously, if you're not at the negotiating table, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And that's what we see when we see this deal.
I also heard the president lecturing the American people in his statement early in the morning that, Reagan and Kennedy negotiated with the Soviets. That's not a parallel either. The Soviets had nuclear weapons. They had a nuclear arsenal. This country, Iran, is trying to obtain that. And you don't negotiate with a country and create a scenario in which within a decade, and certainly much shorter, I believe, your policies, wittingly or unwittingly, are going to, in fact, arm them.
How many communist suicide bombers do you remember?
It's a good point.
This is a different regime. You're right about everything that you're saying. The Soviet Union was a superpower. It wasn't Iran, which the entire world, the leading powers of the world, are sitting opposite a country that is a third-rate power. The Soviet Union was a superpower with nuclear weapons, and even to sit down at the negotiating table with the Soviet Union, you demanded certain things from them. They had to change their position to peaceful coexistence, and you linked certain things. There were many differences, but the big difference is that this is not militant Islam. The Soviet Union was not militant Islam, and the greatest danger to our world is the coupling of militant Islam with nuclear weapons. And this deal could be the marriage certificate for that wedding. That's the problem.
I know you can't reveal it, but I often wonder, late at night when I'm trying to contemplate these things, as you do 24/7, I'm sure, if I'm the Prime Minister of Israel, or how do you even prepare for such a thing? How do you even organize your government and your military for such a thing? I mean, this is such a game changer, right?
It is, and we obviously prepare for everything, and Israel, as the Prime Minister said today, Israel always retains the right to defend itself. We didn't come back from 2,000 years of history to go back to our ancestral homeland to let a bunch of radical ayatollahs wipe us out. But we hope not to be put into a corner, for the whole region to be put into the corner, for this to endanger us, endanger our neighbors. You know, we're there. We obviously have the most to gain to peacefully resolve this issue. It's a question that a lot of people don't ask them. Why is Israel so opposed to this? Why are the Arab states so opposed to this? We're there. Do we not want to block Iran's path to the bomb? We don't want to see a military confrontation because we're the ones who pay the price. So why are we so opposed? We're so opposed because we see all the dangers of this deal. We're closer, we're more vulnerable, and we obviously have to take all the steps necessary in order to defend ourselves. But the other thing that we do is we make our case, and we hope that fair-minded people will look at this and understand what a danger this is and will raise their voice. That's why I'm on your show. That's why the Prime Minister came to Congress. And that's what we'll continue to do in order to oppose a very bad deal that we think is a danger to us. It's a danger to the region, but we think it's a danger to the entire world, obviously also to the United States. Remember, we are the little Satan for Iran. You are the great Satan. They were burning American flags in Tehran 4 days ago, and the President Rouhani, who spoke today, was there. He chose to go there. That tells you everything you need to know.
One last question, Mr. Ambassador. If you're able to answer, great. If you're not, I understand. When was the Prime Minister, or when was your government first informed about the essential terms officially by the United States government?
Well, we knew about it some weeks before the Lausanne framework that was announced in early April. I mean, part of this problem was baked into the cake that they did in the interim agreement that we opposed at the time. The Prime Minister said it's a historic mistake. Why? Because it basically ceded up front that Iran would have an enrichment capability. It ceded up front that this agreement would be time-dependent, would have a sunset clause, and would expire in a certain number of years, no matter whether or not Iran actually changed its behavior. So we have been seeing this coming for a very long time. We have tried to make the case the best that we can to both the United States government and the other governments in the P5+1. But unfortunately, they didn't listen to our warnings, and our only hope at this point, other than the fact that we do have this ability to defend ourselves, is that the American people will listen and will look very carefully at this deal. Their elected representatives will look very carefully at this deal, and they will listen to our concerns. And that's what I'll continue to do every day in Washington over the next 60 days to make clear how Israel views this deal.
Ambassador Ron Dumer, while many of us appreciate the friendship between the United States and Israel, and I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
All right, good luck and God bless. I can't tell if he was in the United States or Israel. That delay suggests to me he may be in Israel, but I'm not sure. He's a brilliant man, absolutely brilliant. He was actually born in the United States, Miami, metropolitan area. And he is a confidant right-hand man of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. This deal is a disaster for us, and for Israel it is an immediate problem. And quite frankly, same with the Arab countries in the Middle East. This is frightening, absolutely frightening.